The kitchen smelled of cinnamon and warm apples, a scent that clung to the air like a memory Emma couldn't shake. She stood at the counter of her daughter-in-law's sleek Chicago condo, her hands dusted with flour, rolling out dough for a pie Liam had begged for that morning. At 6 years old, her grandson had a way of asking for things, big eyes wide, voice soft as a summer breeze, that made it impossible to say no. Not that Emma ever wanted to. For 7 years, she'd been his anchor, his safe harbor, the one who knew exactly how much honey to stir into his oatmeal, or which lullaby chased away the nightmares that woke him trembling in the dark. 7 years. It wasn't just time, it was her heart poured into every moment. From the day Liam was born, Emma had stepped into a role she hadn't planned but embraced without question. Her son David and his wife Sarah were climbing their corporate ladders. David at a law firm downtown, Sarah at a marketing agency that seemed to demand her soul. They'd needed her, and Emma, widowed and untethered since her husband's passing, had needed them too. So she'd moved into their world, trading her quiet Evanston apartment for a fold-out couch in their Lincoln Park condo, her days orbiting Liam's needs. She'd rocked him through colic, paced through fevers, and stitched together Halloween costumes from thrift store scraps when Sarah deemed store-bought ones tacky. Emma didn't mind. Liam's giggle when she tickled his ribs or the way he'd curl into her side during story time was worth every ache in her back, every sleepless night. This morning, though, something felt off. The condo was too quiet, the kind of quiet that hums with unspoken tension. David had left for work at dawn, his briefcase snapping shut like a judge's gavel. Sarah was in the living room, her heels clicking against the hardwood as she paced, phone pressed to her ear, her voice sharp with buzzwords. Metrics, deliverables, Q3 projections. Emma glanced at the clock above the stove. 7:42. Em and Liam would be up soon, tumbling out of bed with his hair a mess, ready to chatter about dinosaurs or the Cubs game they'd watched on TV last night. She smiled to herself, picturing his grin, and pressed the rolling pin harder into the dough. The oven beeped, pulling her from her thoughts. She slid the pie inside, set the timer, and wiped her hands on the faded apron tied around her waist. An old thing, patterned with daisies, a relic from her own kitchen back when she and Tom had hosted barbecues in their tiny backyard. She was about to start on the dishes when Sarah's voice cut through the air, no longer on the phone but directed at her. "Emma, can we talk?" The tone was clipped, not a question but a summons. Emma turned, catching Sarah's expression, lips tight, eyes cool, like she'd already rehearsed this moment. Sarah stood in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed over her tailored blazer, her blonde hair pulled into a bun so perfect it looked like it could deflect bullets. At 34, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who knew her place in the world and expected everyone else to fall in line. "Sure, honey," Emma said, keeping her voice warm, though a prickle of unease settled in her chest. She untied her apron and draped it over a chair, smoothing her sweater as she followed Sarah to the dining table. The glass surface gleamed under the chandelier, reflecting the gray October light filtering through floor-to-ceiling windows. Beyond them, Lake Michigan churned, its waves a restless mirror to Emma's growing apprehension. Sarah didn't sit. She stood, one hand resting on the back of a chair, her posture rigid. "This isn't easy to say," she began, her gaze flicking to the window before settling on Emma. "But David and I have been talking, and we think it's time for a change." Emma's stomach tightened, but she kept her face steady, her hands folded in her lap. "A change?" she echoed, her voice calm, though her pulse ticked faster. Sarah nodded, her fingers tapping the chair's leather upholstery. "Liam's getting older. He's in first grade now, and we're starting to think about what's best for him long term. We appreciate everything you've done, really, we do, but we need our own space, as a family." The words landed like stones, each one heavier than the last. Emma blinked, her mind scrambling to catch up. "Space," she repeated softly, testing the word, trying to understand its shape. "You mean here?" Yes. Sarah's voice was firm now, no room for misinterpretation. It's not that we don't value you, Emma. You've been a godsend. But this condo, it's our home and it's feeling crowded. We want Liam to grow up with us, his parents, setting the rhythm, not with someone else always. There. Someone else. The phrase stung, sharp and cold, slicing through the warmth Emma had carried all morning. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Her throat felt thick, her thoughts tangled. 7 years of wiping tears, packing lunches and singing "You Are My Sunshine" until her voice cracked, reduced to someone else. "I see," she managed at last, her voice barely above a whisper. She looked down at her hands, at the faint scars from years of cooking, gardening, holding Liam through every scraped knee. "And David, he feels this way too?" Sarah hesitated, just for a fraction of a second, but it was enough to tell Emma the truth. This was Sarah's decision, her script, and David had signed off. "Maybe reluctantly, maybe not. We both do," Sarah said, her tone softening slightly, like she'd remembered to add a layer of kindness. "It's not personal. It's just what's right for us now." Emma nodded slowly, her mind racing. She wanted to ask what space meant for her, where she was supposed to go, what happened to the life she'd built around Liam's laughter and David's occasional distracted hugs. But pride held her tongue. She wouldn't beg, not here, not in this sterile dining room that smelled of Sarah's jasmine perfume and ambition. "Okay," she said finally, standing, her knees unsteady but her spine straight. "I'll figure things out." Sarah's face softened further, relief flickering in her eyes. "Thank you, Emma. We knew you'd understand. And you'll still see Liam, of course. Weekends, holidays, whatever works." Whatever works. The vagueness of it cut deeper than the dismissal itself. Emma forced a smile, thin and brittle, and excused herself to the kitchen. The pie was still baking, its aroma now cloying, a reminder of a morning that felt like a lifetime ago. She gripped the counter, her knuckles whitening, and stared at the oven door. Behind her, she heard Sarah's heels click away, followed by the soft chime of a phone notification. Sarah moving on, already untethered from the conversation that had just upended Emma's world. By noon, Emma was packing. Not much, just enough to get through a few days. A suitcase of clothes, her medications, a worn paperback she'd been meaning to read. The condo buzzed with Liam's energy as he bounded in from school, his backpack swinging, oblivious to the fault lines shifting beneath his family. "Grandma, can we make cookies later?" he asked, his voice bright, his sneakers squeaking on the floor. Emma knelt, brushing a lock of brown hair from his forehead. "Not today, sweetheart," she said, her smile steady despite the ache in her chest. "Grandma's got some things to take care of." His brow furrowed, sensing something amiss, but Sarah swept in before he could ask more, redirecting him to his room with a promise of new crayons. Emma watched them go, her heart twisting. She didn't say goodbye. Not yet. She couldn't bear to see confusion cloud Liam's eyes, not when she didn't have answers herself. That afternoon she called Clara, her older sister, who lived in a small town in southern Illinois, a place of cornfields and clapboard houses where time seemed to move slower. Clara picked up on the second ring, her voice warm but laced with concern. "Em, what's wrong? You sound off." Emma meant to explain calmly, but the words spilled out in a rush, raw and jagged. "They don't want me here anymore, Clara. Sarah, she said they need space. After everything, they just pushed me out." Clara's silence was heavy, then her voice sharpened. "Space? After you raised their kid for them? What kind of nonsense is that? You come here, Em, right now. My guest room's yours, and I won't hear a word against it." Emma closed her eyes, gratitude mingling with grief. "I'll need to sell the apartment first," she said. "It's been empty since I moved in with them. I can't afford to keep it." "Then sell it," Clara said firmly. "Start fresh. You don't owe them a damn thing." The call ended, and Emma sat on the fold-out couch, staring at the city skyline through the condo's windows. Chicago pulsed beyond the glass, taxis honking, joggers along the lakefront, the L rumbling in the distance. She'd loved this city once, its energy, its grit, but now it felt like a stranger's house, one she'd overstayed her welcome in. Selling the apartment was easier than Emma expected. It was a modest one-bedroom in Evanston, bought decades ago with Tom when they were young and dreaming of a life bigger than their paychecks. The market was hot, the realtor said, and within weeks it was gone. Sold to a young couple with a baby on the way. The money wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to cushion her landing, to give her options. She wired half to a savings account, kept the rest liquid, and bought a bus ticket to Clara's town of Willow Creek, a speck on the map where the loudest sound was the wind rustling through the fields. Clara's house was a 2-story farmhouse, white paint peeling at the edges, with a front porch that creaked underfoot. Emma arrived on a crisp November evening, her suitcase wheels crunching against gravel. Clara met her at the door, arms open, her silver hair pulled into a loose braid. "Welcome home, sis," she said, and Emma let herself be folded into a hug, the kind that felt like safety. The first weeks were quiet. Emma helped Clara tend the garden, pulling weeds and planting bulbs for spring. They cooked together, pot roast, cornbread, peach cobbler, filling the house with warmth. At night, they sat on the porch sipping tea, watching fireflies blink in the dark. Emma told herself this was peace, that she could rebuild here, away from the city's demands. But late at night, when the house settled into silence, she'd lie awake, picturing Liam's face, wondering if he missed her, if he'd forgotten the sound of her voice. She didn't hear from David or Sarah, not a call, not a text. The silence was louder than any argument, a confirmation that she'd been erased from their story. She tried not to dwell on it, focusing instead on Clara's chatter about town gossip or the stray cat that kept sneaking into the barn. But the hurt lingered, a bruise she couldn't stop pressing. It was late April when the phone rang, shattering the rhythm Emma had started to build. She was in Clara's kitchen, kneading dough for biscuits, when David's name flashed on her screen. Her heart lurched, a mix of hope and dread. She wiped her hands on a dish towel and answered, her voice cautious. "David." "Hey, Mom," he said, his tone too casual, like he was calling to chat about the weather. "How's it going out there?" "Fine," she said, leaning against the counter. "How's Liam?" "He's good, real good, growing like a weed." A pause, then the shift she'd been waiting for. "Listen, we were thinking, summer's coming up and Sarah and I are slammed at work. Liam's been asking about you and we thought maybe you could come back for a bit, help out with him." Emma's grip tightened on the phone. Help out. The words were familiar, a refrain from years past, but now they carried a different weight. "Come back," she repeated, testing the idea. "To Chicago?" "Yeah, just for the summer," David said quickly. "It'd mean a lot to Liam. And, there's this robotics camp he's dying to go to. Really top-notch, great for his future. It's just, the fees are steep, like 10 grand? The number hit her like a slap. $10,000. Not a request, not even a discussion, just an assumption, dropped into the conversation like spare change. She could almost see David's face, his easy smile, the way he'd always leaned on her to fix things without asking what it cost her. 10 grand, she said slowly, her voice steady despite the anger flickering in her chest. "That's a lot of money, David." I know, he said, a nervous laugh creeping in. "We're stretched thin right now with the mortgage and all. Thought maybe since you sold the apartment." He didn't finish, but he didn't need to. The implication was clear. Her money wasn't hers, not really. It was theirs, waiting to be claimed. A debt she owed for the privilege of being needed. Emma closed her eyes, picturing Liam, his gap-toothed grin, the way he'd hug her legs after a bad day. Then she pictured Sarah's cold dismissal, David's silence, the fold-out couch that had been her bed for 7 years. "Let me think about it," she said at last, her tone neutral. "I'll call you back." She hung up before he could press further. Clara, who'd been eavesdropping from the doorway, let out a low whistle. $10,000? For a kids' camp? They've got some nerve. Emma didn't answer. She turned back to the dough, her hands moving mechanically, but her mind was elsewhere, spinning through memories and possibilities. David's call wasn't just a request. It was a test, a pull back into a role she'd barely escaped. She could feel the city reaching for her, its skyline sharp and glittering, promising Liam's laughter but also Sarah's judgment, David's indifference. She thought of Willow Creek, of Clara's porch and the garden taking root. She thought of the money in her account, her safety net, earned through loss and sacrifice. And she thought of Liam, caught in the middle, a boy who deserved more than being a pawn in his parents' games. Emma pressed the dough harder, her jaw tightening. If she went back, it wouldn't be as the woman who'd left, pliable, selfless, invisible. She'd go back on her terms, with eyes wide open, ready to rewrite the rules. The question was how, and what it would cost. Not just in dollars, but in pieces of herself. As the biscuits baked, filling the kitchen with a golden warmth, Emma stared out the window at the fields stretching toward the horizon. Somewhere in that vastness, she'd find her answer. And when she did, David and Sarah wouldn't see her coming. The Chicago skyline glittered against the July dusk, a jagged crown of glass and steel that Emma barely noticed as she stepped off the bus at Union Station. Her suitcase rattled behind her, its wheels catching on the cracked sidewalk, a small rebellion against the city's relentless rhythm. She'd spent the 4-hour ride from Willow Creek replaying David's voice. Just for the summer, Mom. It'd mean a lot to Liam. And the unspoken expectation beneath it, $10,000, a sum that hung between them like a contract she hadn't signed. Now, standing in the humid air, the city's pulse pressing against her, honking taxis, the owls' screech, the chatter of tourists, she felt both out of place and strangely resolute. This wasn't a homecoming, it was a reckoning. David had offered to pick her up, but Emma had declined, citing a need to settle in slowly. The truth was sharper. She didn't trust herself to sit in his car, making small talk while the weight of their last conversation lingered. Instead, she took a cab to Lincoln Park, the neighborhood that had once been her world. The condo building loomed ahead, its sleek facade reflecting the last rays of sunlight. She paused at the entrance, her reflection distorted in the glass doors. An older woman, hair streaked with gray, eyes carrying a new kind of steel. 7 years ago she'd walked through these doors eager to help, her heart open. Tonight she was someone else, someone who'd learned the cost of giving too much. The elevator hummed to the 10th floor, and when David opened the door his smile was cautious, like he sensed the shift in her. "Mom, you made it," he said, pulling her into a quick hug that felt more obligatory than warm. He was still in his work clothes, navy suit tie loosened, his dark hair thinning at the temples. At 36, he looked like a man stretched thin, caught between ambition and something heavier. "Grandma!" Liam's voice cut through the moment, and before Emma could set her suitcase down, he barreled into her, arms wrapping around her waist. His hair smelled of shampoo and summer sweat, and for a second she let herself sink into the hug, her heart swelling. He was taller now, his face losing its baby roundness, but those hazel eyes, Tom's eyes, still held the same spark. "Hey, buddy," she said, ruffling his hair. "Missed you." "Missed you more," he shot back, grinning, then tugged her toward the living room. "Come see my new Lego set? It's a spaceship." Sarah appeared from the kitchen, her presence like a sudden drop in temperature. "Liam, let Grandma breathe," she said, her voice smooth but edged like a blade wrapped in silk. She wore yoga pants and a fitted tank top, her blonde hair in a high ponytail, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Emma, welcome back. We've got the couch set up for you, same as before." Emma nodded, her gaze steady. "Thanks, Sarah." She didn't mention the couch yet, didn't let on that she had no intention of sleeping on it. That conversation could wait. For now, she let Liam pull her to the coffee table, where a half-built Lego structure sprawled like a miniature galaxy. As he chattered about thrusters and laser cannons, she felt David and Sarah watching, their silence heavy with unspoken calculations. Dinner was takeout, Thai food from a place down the street, a nod to convenience rather than hospitality. Emma sat across from Liam, who slurped noodles and recounted his day at summer camp, oblivious to the undercurrent at the table. Sarah picked at her pad thai, her fork tapping the plate, while David scrolled through his phone, muttering about emails. Emma ate quietly, her senses sharp, catching every glance, every pause. The condo hadn't changed much. Same white walls, same abstract art, same view of Lake Michigan churning beyond the windows. But it felt smaller, as if the air had thickened with expectations she hadn't agreed to. After dinner, Liam begged for a story and Emma obliged, settling on the couch with a battered copy of The Velveteen Rabbit. His head rested against her shoulder, his breathing slowing as she read about love making things real. For a moment it was just them, the world shrinking to the cadence of her voice and the weight of his trust. But when she closed the book, Sarah's voice broke the spell. "Liam, bedtime," she said, standing in the doorway, arms crossed. "You've got camp tomorrow." He groaned but obeyed, hugging Emma goodnight before trudging to his room. Emma set the book down, her fingers lingering on its worn cover, and met Sarah's gaze. It was now or never. "Sarah, David," she said, standing, her voice calm but deliberate. "I appreciate you having me here, but I won't be staying on the couch. I've booked a room at a motel nearby, the Blue Star just off Clark Street. It's close enough for me to help with Liam, but I need my own space." The room froze. David's phone clattered to the table, his mouth half open. Sarah's eyes narrowed, her lips parting as if to protest, but Emma pressed on, her tone unshakable. "I'll be here every morning to watch Liam, take him to camp, whatever you need. But at night, I'll head back, and since this was a last-minute trip, I'd appreciate it if you could cover the room. It's only fair." David blinked, caught off guard. "A motel? Mom, You don't have to do that. The couch is fine, like always." "It's not fine," Emma said, her smile polite but firm. "Not for me. Not anymore." Sarah's face tightened, her fingers curling into her palms. "Emma, this is unexpected. We thought you'd be comfortable here. A motel's expensive, and we're already stretched with Liam's camp and—" $10,000, Emma cut in, her voice still soft but carrying a new edge. "That's what you mentioned, David. If money's tight, I understand. But I'm not here to bankroll anything. I'm here for Liam. The motel's my condition." The silence that followed was electric, a storm gathering in the space between them. David rubbed his neck, his eyes darting to Sarah, who looked like she'd swallowed something sour. Emma held their gaze, her heart pounding but her resolve ironclad. She'd spent 7 years bending to their rhythm, cooking, cleaning, fading into the background. This time, she'd set the tempo. Finally, David sighed, pulling out his wallet. "Okay, Mom, we'll cover it, for now." He handed her a stack of bills. $500, crisp and grudging. "Let's just make this work." Sarah said nothing, her jaw clenched as she turned and disappeared into the kitchen, the clatter of dishes her only response. Emma pocketed the money, her expression neutral, and picked up her suitcase. "I'll be back at 8 tomorrow," she said. "Good night." She walked out, the condo door clicking shut behind her, and stepped into the humid night. The city buzzed, laughter from a rooftop bar, the rumble of a passing bus. But Emma felt lighter, as if she'd shed a weight she'd carried too long. The Blue Star Motel was a modest place, its neon sign flickering like a half-hearted promise. But when she checked in, the room was hers. Clean, quiet, a bed that didn't fold out. She sank onto it, exhaling, and called Clara. "Step 1 done," she said, a smile creeping into her voice. "They didn't see it coming." Clara's laugh crackled through the phone. "That's my sister, keep 'em on their toes." Emma hung up, staring at the ceiling, where a water stain bloomed like a map of uncharted territory. She wasn't naive. David and Sarah wouldn't let go of their expectations easily, especially not that $10,000 camp. But for the first time in years, she felt the ground beneath her shift in her favor. This was just the beginning. The next morning, Emma arrived at the condo at 8 sharp, her knock precise. Liam answered, his face lighting up like a 4th of July sparkler. "Grandma! Can we go to the park later?" "We'll see, buddy," she said, stepping inside, her tote bag slung over one shoulder. The living room was tidy, but the air carried a faint tension, like a radio tuned to static. Sarah emerged from the bedroom, still in pajamas, her smile brittle. "Morning, Emma," she said, her tone overly bright. "Liam's got breakfast in the kitchen, cereal, nothing fancy. I was just about to head out." Emma nodded, her expression neutral. "I'll take it from here." She didn't offer to cook, didn't glance at the dishes piling in the sink. That wasn't her role anymore. David was already gone, his absence a familiar void, but Sarah lingered, zipping up her jacket. "Oh, Emma, one thing," she said, her voice casual but pointed. "Could you keep the TV down tonight? Liam's got early camp and it's hard to sleep with the noise." Emma paused, setting her bag on the counter. The request was small, but it carried a weight she recognized. A test, a nudge back into the old pattern, where she apologized, adjusted, erased herself. She met Sarah's eyes, her smile polite but unyielding. "I won't be here tonight, Sarah. Motel, remember? But I'll make sure Liam's settled before I go." Sarah's lips twitched, a flicker of irritation breaking through her composure. "Right. Of course." She grabbed her purse and left, the door slamming just a touch too hard. Emma turned to Liam, who was spooning Cheerios into his mouth, milk dripping onto the table. "Ready for camp?" she asked, wiping the spill with a napkin. Not because she had to, but because it was Liam, and for him, she'd always been just a little. The day passed in a blur of routine, dropping Liam at camp, picking him up, stopping for ice cream at a truck parked near Lincoln Park Zoo. He chattered about robots and Minecraft, his world untouched by the currents swirling around him. But as they walked back to the condo, he said something that stopped Emma cold. "Mom says I need to play by myself more," he mumbled, kicking a pebble. "She says it's important to not need you all the time." Emma's step slowed, her breath catching. The words were Liam's, but the cadence was Sarah's, a script planted in his mind. She knelt, meeting his eyes, searching for the boy who'd clung to her through thunderstorms and scraped knees. "Do you like playing by yourself?" she asked gently. He shrugged, his gaze dropping. "Sometimes, but I like when we build stuff together better." Her heart cracked, not just for him, but for herself. For the years she'd poured into him, only to hear her place questioned through his innocent voice. She forced a smile, ruffling his hair. "We'll build something awesome tomorrow, okay?" But as they climbed the condo stairs, anger simmered beneath her calm. Sarah wasn't just pushing her out. She was rewriting Emma's role in Liam's life, reducing her to a convenience, a shadow to be dismissed. Emma had been background noise too long, cooking dinners Sarah critiqued, folding laundry David ignored, muting her own needs to keep their lives smooth. No more. That evening, after tucking Liam in, Emma sat at the kitchen table with a notepad and pen. The condo was quiet, Sarah and David still at work, their absence a chance to think. She wrote carefully, her handwriting steady. Child care agreement. Below it, she listed terms. Hours from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Responsibilities limited to Liam's care, no cooking, no cleaning, no errands. Transportation costs covered, overtime by mutual consent. Each word was a brick, building a wall between the Emma who'd given everything and the Emma who'd demand respect. She folded the paper, slipped it into her bag, and leaned back, staring at the city lights beyond the window. Chicago was a city of reinvention, steel rising from ashes, neighborhoods reborn from decay. If it could change, so could she. Sarah's criticisms, David's passivity, Liam's borrowed words. They weren't just slights. They were a wake-up call, a spark igniting something fierce within her. The next morning, Emma handed the agreement to Sarah as Liam ate breakfast. The kitchen smelled of burnt toast, Sarah's attempted domesticity abandoned for a protein shake. Sarah took the paper, her brow furrowing as she scanned it. "What's this?" she asked, her voice tight. "Clarity," Emma said simply, pouring Liam a glass of orange juice. "I'm here to help with Liam, but I need boundaries. This spells it out. No confusion, no assumptions." Sarah's eyes flicked to David, who'd just walked in, coffee mug in hand. He glanced at the paper over her shoulder, his expression shifting from confusion to unease. "Mom, a contract? Really? We're family." "Exactly," Emma said, her tone even but firm. "Family respects each other. I've given a lot, 7 years of it. Now I'm asking for respect in return. Sign it, or I'm on the next bus back to Willow Creek." The words hung in the air, a challenge neither had expected. Liam looked up from his cereal, sensing the shift, but Emma kept her focus on Sarah and David, her gaze unwavering. She wasn't bluffing, and they knew it. Sarah's lips pressed into a thin line, her fingers tightening on the paper. David rubbed his jaw, caught between loyalty to his wife and the reality of losing Emma's help. The clock ticked above the stove, each second stretching the tension taut. Finally, Sarah grabbed a pen, scrawling her name with a flourish that felt like defiance. David followed, his signature hesitant. Emma took the paper, folded it neatly, and tucked it away. "Thank you," she said, her smile small but victorious. "I'll see you at 6. She left them standing in the kitchen, their silence louder than any argument. Outside, the city woke. Joggers along the lakefront, baristas steaming milk, the Cubs flag flapping outside Wrigley Field. Emma walked to the motel, her steps lighter, her mind racing. She'd drawn a line, but the real test was coming. That $10,000 camp, a shadow looming over every interaction. Sarah and David thought they could lean on her, bend her to their will. They were wrong. As she unlocked her motel room, her phone buzzed. A text from Clara. "How's the city treating you?" "Don't let 'em walk all over you." Emma smiled, typing back, "Not a chance. I'm just getting started." She tossed the phone onto the bed and opened the window, letting the city's noise flood in. Horns, laughter, life. Somewhere out there, Liam was at camp, building robots, dreaming big. For him, she'd stay, but not as a doormat. She'd fight for her place, for her worth, and when the summer ended, they'd all know exactly who Emma Wales. The Chicago summer sun hung low, casting golden streaks across Lincoln Park's community playground, where laughter and the squeak of swings filled the air like a melody Emma hadn't realized she'd missed. She sat on a weathered bench, Liam beside her, his sneakers kicking up dust as he munched on a peanut butter sandwich she'd packed. It was late July, 3 weeks into her return, and the rhythm of their days had settled into something new, structured by the contract she'd forced David and Sarah to sign, yet softened by moments like this, where the world felt wide and possible again. Emma's motel room at the Blue Star had become her sanctuary, its plain walls and creaky bed a reminder that she was no longer tethered to the condo's expectations. She arrived each morning at 8, left at 6, and in between she poured herself into Liam, his stories, his questions, his boundless curiosity, while refusing to touch the dishes piling in the sink or the laundry spilling from Sarah's hamper. The contract was her shield, and though Sarah's tight smiles and David's awkward silences hinted at their frustration, they hadn't challenged it. Not yet. Today, though, Emma had suggested the park instead of the usual routine of camp drop-offs and condo-bound afternoons. Liam had lit up at the idea, grabbing his baseball cap, a Cubs logo faded from too many summers, and racing ahead as they walked the shaded paths. The park was alive with Chicago's heartbeat, kids chasing frisbees, moms pushing strollers, an old man feeding pigeons from a paper bag. Emma watched Liam join a group of boys near the slide, his laughter carrying back to her, and felt a pang, not of loss, but of something reclaiming itself, like a flower pushing through cracked pavement. "First time here?" The voice came from a woman settling onto the bench beside her, her silver hair tucked under a wide-brimmed hat. She carried a canvas tote stuffed with yarn and knitting needles, her smile warm but curious. Emma glanced over, caught off guard. "Not exactly," she said, her tone light. "I used to bring my grandson here when he was little, just back for the summer." The woman nodded, her eyes crinkling. "I'm Margaret, run the community garden over by the gazebo. You've got away with that boy. Saw how he listened when you called him back for his sandwich. Not every kid minds their grown-ups like that." Emma's chest warmed, a flicker of pride she hadn't felt in too long. "Thanks. Liam's a good kid. I'm Emma, by the way." Margaret's gaze softened, as if she sensed the weight behind Emma's words. They talked easily about the park's history, the best food trucks on Clark Street, the way Chicago summers could feel like a gift and a test all at once. When Liam ran over, breathless, to show Emma a shiny beetle he'd found, Margaret chuckled. "You ever teach him how to plant anything? We've got a kids' gardening day coming up. He'd fit right in." Emma hesitated, picturing Sarah's reaction. A community event, unstructured and public, might not fit her curated vision of Liam's summer. But then she thought of Liam's grin, the dirt smudged on his cheek, and nodded. "We'll be there." That Saturday, Emma and Liam arrived at the garden, a patchwork of raised beds bursting with tomatoes, zucchini, and marigolds. Margaret greeted them with gloves and a trowel, pairing Liam with a girl named Ava who explained the difference between weeds and sprouts with the seriousness of a professor. Emma watched him dig, his small hands patting soil around a sunflower seedling, and something inside her shifted. For 7 years, she'd been grandma in the condo, cook, cleaner, comforter, but here she was just Emma, a woman with stories to share, wisdom to offer. Other parents noticed. A young mom, her toddler tugging at her jeans, asked Emma how she kept Liam so engaged. "He doesn't even look at a screen," she said, half laughing, half awed. Emma smiled, sharing a trick she'd learned years ago, turning pebbles into a counting game, making chores a story. "Kids want to feel seen," she said simply. "Give them that, and they'll surprise you." By noon, the group had gathered for lemonade under a canopy, and Margaret pulled Emma aside. "You're a natural," she said, pressing a flyer into her hand. "We do a volunteer day next week, sorting donations for the shelter. Bring Liam. It's good for kids to see what giving looks like." Emma tucked the flyer into her pocket, her heart fuller than it had been in months. She wasn't just reclaiming her time with Liam, she was rediscovering herself, her voice, her worth, the parts of her that had nothing to do with Sarah's kitchen or David's silence. The park, with its messy vitality, felt like a mirror, reflecting a woman she'd almost forgotten. Back at the condo, the air was thicker, laced with a tension that grew sharper each day. Sarah's critiques had started small. "Emma, could you rinse the plates before stacking them?" but escalated into pointed jabs. One evening, as Emma read to Liam on the couch, Sarah stood in the doorway, arms crossed, her voice slicing through the story's quiet. "Emma, the TV was on late last night," she said, her tone clipped. "Liam's got early camp and it's disruptive. Could you be more mindful?" Emma closed the book, her pulse quickening but her face calm. "I turned it off before I left, Sarah. Must have been someone else." She held Sarah's gaze, refusing to shrink. The contract didn't cover apologies for things she hadn't done. Sarah's lips tightened, but she didn't push. Instead, she turned to Liam, her voice softening just enough to mask the edge. "Sweetie, time for bed. You don't need Grandma hovering all the time, right? You're a big boy now." Liam hesitated, his eyes flicking to Emma, then back to his mother. "I like Grandma's stories," he mumbled, clutching the book. Sarah's smile faltered, but she ushered him to his room, leaving Emma alone in the living room. The words lingered, hovering, big boy, a deliberate nudge to distance her. Emma stared at the city lights beyond the window, Lake Michigan, a dark expanse, and felt the truth settle like a stone. Sarah wasn't just irritated, she was threatened, as if Emma's presence challenged her claim on Liam's world. The next morning, Emma overheard Liam on the phone in his room, his voice small and rehearsed. "Grandma, Mummy says if you come back forever, we can go to the fun park, and maybe you'll help with my robot camp." He paused, then added, "I miss you." Emma froze in the hallway, her hand on the doorknob. The words weren't Liam's, they were Sarah's, fed to him like lines in a play. She stepped into his room, kneeling beside him, and took the phone gently. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice steady despite the ache. "Grandma's right here. We'll have fun, but you don't need to worry about camps or parks, okay?" He nodded, confused but trusting, and Emma hung up, her mind racing. Sarah and David weren't just leaning on her for money. They were using Liam, his innocence, to pull her back into their orbit. The realization wasn't new, but hearing it in his voice cut deeper, a betrayal that burned hotter than Sarah's cold dismissals. That evening, dinner was a battlefield disguised as a meal. David had brought home pizza, deep dish from Lou Malnati's, a Chicago staple, but the gesture felt hollow, like a bribe to smooth over the cracks. Liam ate happily, sauce smudged on his chin, while Emma sat across from Sarah and David, her slice untouched. The conversation started innocently, Liam's camp, the weather, but Sarah steered it with purpose, her voice honeyed yet sharp. "Emma, we've been looking into that robotics camp," she said, wiping her hands on a napkin. "It's incredible. Coding, teamwork, even a guest instructor from MIT. It's $5,000, but it's an investment in Liam's future. You know how competitive schools are these days." Emma's fork paused mid-air, her eyes meeting Sarah's. 5,000, not 10. Either David had misspoken before, or they'd adjusted their ask, testing her limits. She set her fork down, folding her hands in her lap. "Sounds impressive," she said, her tone neutral. "What's the plan to cover it?" David shifted in his seat, his pizza forgotten. "Well, it's tight for us right now," he said, his voice low, almost apologetic. "With the condo payments, Sarah's car loan, we thought maybe, since you're here, you might help out. Just this once." Emma let the words hang, the silence stretching like a taut wire. She thought of the motel bills they'd grudgingly paid, the contract they'd signed with resentment, the way Liam's fun park call had echoed Sarah's handwriting. She leaned forward, her smile polite but unyielding. "David, Sarah," she began, her voice calm, "you both do well. That new SUV in the garage, Lexus, right? And Sarah, I saw that Coach bag on your Instagram last week. Beautiful. $5,000 isn't pocket change, but it's not out of reach for you. Liam's your son. His future's your responsibility, not mine." The room stilled, the only sound Liam's fork scraping his plate, oblivious to the storm brewing. Sarah's face paled, her lips thinning into a line. David's eyes dropped to the table, his fingers fidgeting with a napkin. Emma held their gaze, her heart pounding but her resolve ironclad. She wasn't their ATM, their maid, their fallback plan. Not anymore. Sarah recovered first, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Emma, we're not asking for a handout. We thought you'd want to invest in Liam since you're so close to him." "I am close to him," Emma said, her tone steady. "That's why I'm here, watching him, loving him. But love doesn't come with the checkbook. You've got the means. Use them." David opened his mouth, then closed it, caught in the crossfire of Emma's clarity and Sarah's rising anger. Sarah pushed her chair back, standing, her eyes blazing. "This isn't about money," she snapped. "It's about what's best for Liam." "You're making it a competition, Emma, trying to be the better parent, the one he loves more." The accusation landed like a slap, raw and personal. Emma's breath caught, but she didn't flinch. She stood too, her movements slow, deliberate, her voice low but fierce. "Sarah, I've raised him for 7 years. Diapers, fevers, first words. I didn't do it for applause or to steal him from you. I did it because you asked. Don't twist that into something ugly because you're scared he might love me too." Liam looked up, his eyes wide, sensing the shift. David reached for him, murmuring, "Hey, buddy, let's get you cleaned up," and led him to the kitchen, leaving Emma and Sarah locked in a silent standoff. Sarah's chest heaved, her hands clenched, but Emma didn't back down. She'd spent too long smoothing over tensions, swallowing her hurt. This time, she'd let the truth stand. Sarah's voice dropped, trembling with fury. "You're changing him, Emma. He says please now, plays alone, talks about you like you're the only one who matters. Do you know how that feels, to watch someone else take your place?" Emma's heart twisted, not with guilt, but with a strange pity. Sarah's resentment wasn't just about control. It was fear, raw and human, that she was losing Liam to a bond she couldn't replicate. But Emma wouldn't apologize for loving him, for being the steady hand he'd needed when Sarah and David were too busy building their empire. "I'm not taking your place," Emma said quietly. "I'm just being his grandma. If that scares you, that's not my burden to carry." Sarah's eyes glistened, but she turned away, storming to the bedroom, the door slamming behind her. Emma stood alone in the dining room, the pizza boxes cold, the city lights flickering beyond the windows. She thought of the park, of Margaret's kind eyes, of Liam's dirt-streaked hands, planting seeds. She wasn't just surviving here, she was growing, reclaiming pieces of herself Sarah couldn't touch. Later that night at the motel, Emma sat on the bed, her phone buzzing with a text from David. "I'm sorry about tonight. Sarah's struggling. Liam's different because of you, in a good way. I see it now." She stared at the words, her thumb hovering over the reply button. Part of her wanted to soften, to bridge the gap with her son, but another part, the part that had signed the contract, that had stood up to Sarah, knew better. Words weren't enough. Not yet. She set the phone down and opened the motel window, letting the city's hum fill the room, distant sirens, laughter from a bar, the lake's restless waves. Tomorrow she'd take Liam to the volunteer day at the shelter, sorting clothes, teaching him what it meant to give without expectation. Sarah might resent it, David might waver, but Emma was done bending. She'd build something new, for Liam and for herself, and no one, not even family, would pull her back into the shadows. But as she drifted to sleep, Liam's voice echoed, "Mommy says, if you come back forever." And a question lingered, sharp and unsettling. How far would Sarah go to keep her out? Emma didn't know, but she'd be ready. The Chicago skyline shimmered under a late August moon, its lights a dazzling farewell Emma couldn't bring herself to admire. She stood in the Blue Star motel room, her suitcase open on the bed, folding her clothes with deliberate care. A few cotton blouses, a pair of jeans, the scarf Clara had knitted her last winter. The room smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and city air, a stark contrast to the condo's sterile polish, but it had been hers. A space where she'd reclaimed her voice. 3 weeks ago, she'd arrived with a contract and a resolve to stand firm. Now, as summer waned, she was preparing to leave, not as the woman who'd been pushed out, but as one who'd chosen her own path. The condo had become a crucible, forging Emma into someone sharper, steadier. The park days with Liam, planting sunflowers, sorting clothes at the shelter, had reminded her of her worth, while Sarah's accusations and David's wavering loyalty had tested it. Last night's confrontation still echoed. Sarah's claim that Emma was stealing Liam's affection, her voice cracking with fear and fury. Emma's refusal to shrink, her words cutting through the haze of resentment. David's text afterward, "Liam's different because of you, in a good way," had stirred something in her. Not forgiveness, but a flicker of hope that he might one day see her fully. Yet hope wasn't enough to keep her here, tethered to a family that valued her only when it suited them. Emma zipped her suitcase, her movements quiet but resolute. She'd decided yesterday, after the shelter volunteer day, when Liam had beamed while handing out blankets, his small hands mimicking her care. She'd given him what she could: love, boundaries, a glimpse of giving without expectation. but staying longer risked slipping back into the role Sarah and David wanted, the invisible grandma, always available, never equal. Emma deserved more. So did Liam, though he was too young to understand it yet. She glanced at the clock, 10:17 p.m. The condo was a short walk away, and she'd promised to stop by one last time to tuck Liam in before her early bus tomorrow. She pulled on her jacket, slung her tote bag over her shoulder, and stepped into the night. Chicago hummed around her, laughter from a rooftop bar, the distant wail of a siren, the lake's restless churn. The city had been her home once, its energy a pulse she'd matched. Now it felt like a chapter closing, its pages worn but cherished. At the condo, David opened the door, his face etched with fatigue. He wore a faded Northwestern t-shirt, his hair mussed, as if he'd been running his hands through it. "Mom," he said, his voice low, almost hesitant. "Didn't expect you this late." "Wanted to see Liam," Emma said, stepping inside. The living room was dim, the TV off, a pizza box abandoned on the coffee table. Another Lou Malnati's, the crust cold. Sarah was nowhere in sight, likely in the bedroom, avoiding the inevitable. David nodded, rubbing his neck. "He's in his room, coloring. Been talking about you all day. The shelter, that garden thing. You've made a mark on him." Emma's throat tightened, but she kept her expression steady. "He's a good kid, always has been." She moved past him, down the hall to Liam's room, where a soft glow spilled from under the door. He sat cross-legged on the floor, markers scattered around a sketchbook, his tongue poking out as he drew. The sight hit her like a wave. 7 years of moments like this, from his first scribbles to now, his lines surer, his world bigger. "Hey, buddy," she said, kneeling beside him. "What you working on?" He looked up, his grin instant. "It's us, Grandma. At the park, with the sunflowers." He held up the page. A stick figure Emma, her dress blue, holding hands with a smaller Liam under a giant yellow bloom. The colors bled outside the lines, but it was perfect, a snapshot of joy she'd carry forever. "It's beautiful," she said, her voice catching. "Can I keep it?" "Nuha," he said, giggling. "I'm gonna make you a better one, you'll see." She ruffled his hair, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I'll hold you to that." She glanced at the sketchbook, open to a page they'd drawn together. Birds soaring over a tree, their wings smudged with crayon. On impulse, she picked up a pencil and wrote in the margin, her handwriting small but clear, "If you miss Grandma, draw something and mail it to me. Letters last longer than calls." She closed the book gently, hoping he'd find it later, when he needed her most. "Time for bed," she said, standing. Liam groaned but climbed under the covers, clutching a stuffed dinosaur she'd bought him years ago. She tucked him in, smoothing the blanket, and kissed his forehead. "Sleep tight, sweetheart." "Grandma," he mumbled, eyes heavy. "You'll come back tomorrow, right?" Her heart twisted, but she smiled. "Not tomorrow, buddy. But I'll see you soon, promise." He nodded, drifting off, and Emma lingered in the doorway, memorizing the rise and fall of his chest. This wasn't goodbye, not forever, but it was an ending, one she'd chosen to protect them both. Back in the living room, David waited, his hands stuffed in his pockets. Sarah had emerged, standing by the kitchen island, her arms crossed, her face a mask of guarded silence. The air felt heavy, like a storm about to break, and Emma braced herself, expecting another jab, another plea to stay. Instead, David stepped forward, his voice rough. "Mom, I'm sorry." He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket and handed it to her, his eyes avoiding hers. "I should have said it sooner. I should have stood up for you." Emma took the paper, unfolding it slowly. His handwriting was uneven, scratched out in haste. "You were always home to us. We forgot what that meant. I'm sorry for letting you carry it alone." The words blurred as her eyes stung, not with anger but with a grief she hadn't named. She looked at him, searching for the boy who'd once clung to her after nightmares, now buried under years of compromises and silence. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady despite the ache. "But I can't stay, David. Not here. Not like before." He nodded, his jaw tight, as if he'd expected it but hoped otherwise. "Will you come back? Live with us again?" She shook her head, gentle but firm. "Let's wait till Liam's older. Then we'll see." Sarah shifted, her sneakers squeaking on the hardwood. She opened her mouth, then closed it, her fingers twitching like she was wrestling with words. Finally, she spoke, her voice clipped but softer than Emma expected. "I was wrong, too. Push you out. It wasn't fair." The admission hung there, raw and incomplete, but Emma didn't press. She nodded once, acknowledging it, and picked up her tote bag. "Good night," she said, her tone final, and walked to the door. As it closed behind her, she heard David's voice, faint but clear. "I'm sorry, Mom." She didn't look back. The elevator ride was silent, the lobby empty, and when she stepped into the night, Chicago felt different, less a cage, more a memory. Her phone buzzed as she reached the motel. A text from Sarah. "Sorry, I overreacted. Didn't see things clearly. No greeting, no warmth, just a brittle olive branch." Emma read it, her thumb hovering, but didn't reply. She saved the message, a reminder of how far she'd come, and slipped the phone into her pocket. The bus to Willow Creek left at dawn, its engine rumbling as Emma boarded, her suitcase stowed below. She chose a window seat, watching Chicago fade, its skyscrapers shrinking, its lights blurring into a smear of gold and gray. The skyline gave way to suburbs, then fields, the horizon stretching wide and green, a promise of something simpler. She leaned her head against the glass, David's note tucked in her bag. Liam's sketchbook words etched in her mind. She wasn't running away. She was running toward a life she'd build, not one she'd settle for. Clara's farmhouse came into view by midday, its white clapboard glowing under a cloudless sky. She stood on the gravel drive, hands on her hips, her grin as wide as the Illinois prairie. "Well, look at you," she called as Emma stepped off the bus. "City warrior, back to conquer the countryside." Emma laughed, the sound freer than she'd expected, and let Clara pull her into a hug that smelled of lavender and earth. The suitcase wheels crunched as they walked to the porch, where a new mint plant sprouted in a clay pot, Clara's latest experiment. Inside, the kitchen was warm, a pot of chili simmering, the dog snoring in his bed by the hearth. It wasn't just a house, it was a home, one Emma belonged to without question. The days slipped into a rhythm, slow and honest. Mornings, Emma and Clara worked the garden, their hands caked with soil as they planted carrots and beans, the earth yielding to their care. Afternoons, they made jam, blueberry, tart and sweet, filling jars that caught the sunlight like amber gems. Evenings, they walked to the town market, trading stories with neighbors who greeted Emma like she'd never left. The old man next door brought fresh trout. A woman down the road dropped off cornbread, still warm, saying, "Eat up, there's more where that came from." Each gesture stitched Emma back into the world, healing wounds Chicago had left raw. She thought of Liam often, picturing him at camp, his hands busy with wires and code. She wondered if he'd found her note, if he'd draw her a picture as she'd asked. The ache of missing him was constant, but it wasn't despair, it was love, steady and enduring, a bond no distance could break. One crisp September morning, the doorbell chimed, startling Emma as she kneaded dough for biscuits. Clara was out tending the chickens, so Emma wiped her hands and answered, finding the mailman, his cap askew, holding a small envelope. "Got something for you, Miss Emma," he said, his drawl warm. "Looks like it's from the city." Her heart skipped, recognizing the crooked handwriting before she saw the name, Liam. She thanked the mailman, her fingers trembling as she carried the envelope to the kitchen table. She sat, sunlight streaming through the window, and opened it carefully, as if it might vanish. A folded piece of cardstock slipped out, a drawing of a boy and a woman in a blue dress, standing under a tree. 3 birds soaring above. The lines were shaky, the colors bold, and on the back, in Liam's block letters, "Grandma, are you still making blueberry jam? I want to eat your bread again. My teacher said to write about the warmest person I know. I wrote about you. I miss you." Emma's breath caught, her eyes stinging but her lips curving into a smile. She read the words again, each one a thread tying her to Liam, not through obligation but through love, pure, unscripted, his own. She stood, crossing to the fridge, and pinned the drawing with a magnet, its colors bright against the stainless steel. The jars of jam lined the counter, glowing in the morning light, and she opened one, tasting a spoonful. It was sweeter than she remembered, like summer distilled, like Liam's heart reaching across the miles. Clara burst in, brushing dirt from her hands. "What's with the grin?" she teased, spotting the drawing. "Don't tell me. Another city bill?" Emma shook her head, her voice soft but steady. "No. It's a reminder I still matter." Clara raised an eyebrow, peering at the drawing. "Matter? Em, you're the queen of Willow Creek. Those city folks don't know what they lost." Emma laughed, the sound light, and tucked Liam's letter into a wooden box in the kitchen drawer, where she kept the important things. Tom's old watch, Clara's first knitting pattern, now this. She returned to the dough, her hands moving with purpose, the ache of Chicago fading into something softer, something she could carry without breaking. Outside, the fields stretched to the horizon, green and endless, whispering of seasons to come. Emma didn't know when she'd see Liam again, but she knew he'd carry her with him, in his drawings, his stories, his heart. And here, in Willow Creek, she'd grow roots deeper than any city could offer, a life built on her terms, with love that didn't demand her surrender. As she slid the biscuits into the oven, the phone buzzed. A new message. Maybe David, maybe Sarah. She didn't check. Not yet. The kitchen filled with warmth. The world outside hummed, and Emma stood tall, her heart full, ready for whatever came next.